it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's Tuesday night, which means it's Liam Kennedy night. Good evening, Liam.
Evening, you alright?
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Good to see you. And as always, we'll be talking through the last 7 days at Newcastle United and taking the viewers' questions. And pleased to say that there's already plenty questions coming in and plenty comments coming in. So keep them coming. We're on for the next hour. And don't forget, I am going to be straight back on for another hour after this show to talk to former Newcastle United player Kevin Gallagher. And he is also going to take your questions. Got to say thanks to QTech for this. Like, I mean, what a flyer that is, Liam. I mean, these flyers just come flying in, and that, I like that one. Me on Rafa's body, and you on Alan Shearer's body. It's looks perfect.
I think you could play him in a film. I really do.
Hey, never say never, mate. Never say never. Funnier things have happened. I need to practice my Spanish accent, I think. I could certainly take glasses off and stick them in my top pocket like Rafa used to do, though. Yeah. All right, okay. Let's start with the game at the weekend, mate. How did you see that performance at Old Trafford? Did you see any positives like Steve Bruce?
Look, I think it's... Look, right, I'm gonna split this up into saying whether there actually were positives or not, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about Steve Bruce and his language and his demeanour and the way he acts. I'll start with that. I think he's very, very awkward with the language that he uses at times. I don't think this is a situation where we should be talking about we got beat again, but there's some positives. I just don't think it's the right kind of conversation he should be having. Is basically the only person who speaks to the media and directly to the fans effectively. I think he leaves himself open with a really awkward use of language, and that brings one to what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable when you're walking off the field. I think a lack of fans in the stadiums probably had a big impact on him walking off smiling and laughing and carrying on with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who he obviously knows. There's nothing wrong with that, essentially. But to do it walking off the field after another defeat when your team's sort of hurtling towards relegation was really like a lack of awareness. And I can understand why some people just suddenly went, well, he doesn't give a toss. I can understand why people are looking at it like that. I don't believe that's the case necessarily, but I think it was very, very ill-advised. And I've got to be honest, if I was a media man at Newcastle United at the moment and I was trying to deal with Steve Bruce, honestly, I would rather he was gagged. I'd rather say, don't speak to the media, stop doing it. Please just act as if you're gutted that they've been defeated. You know what he could have done there with the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer thing was he could have wandered off the pitch with a sullen face, just being respectful. And when the door's shut, as soon as he's down the tunnel, he can grab him around the arm and have a laugh and carry on because he's his mate. And, but there's ways and means of doing things. And I think Steve Bruce, as he has a lot of the time throughout the time at Newcastle United, nearly 2 years now, he just gets it wrong. He gets it wrong consistently, whether it's team selection, whether it's formations, whether it's criticising your own fans, of which you say you're one yourself, criticising the media, directing his anger in the wrong area, if you ask me, criticising his own players. I mean, the amount of times he digs his own players out, absolutely unbelievable the way he does it. Scapegoating players such as Sean Longstaff, Matty Longstaff. I mean, he's got it wrong at so many turns. Were there any actual positives then? So now I'm going to sound like Steve Bruce. So for 55 minutes, yes. 55 minutes of that game, Newcastle were great. But they were rubbish from 55 to 90, and that's why they got beat 3-1. Defensively, they weren't good enough. I think we know that. I think there's too many individual errors in that defensive unit. And as much praise as I've given the tactical tweaks, I think there needs to be another little tweak. And I'm not necessarily saying that's in an attacking sense. The two fullbacks, whether you think they're good enough or not, are literally being left. They've been hung out to dry in this system formation. They've got no cover. And when anybody doubles up outside, they're totally done. Emil Kraft couldn't, half the time looks like a Sunday morning defender, his body position and the way he goes up against a winger. I mean, I think you could probably beat him in a one-on-one. Jamal Lewis, I would argue, I think there's something there. I think there is a little bit of a player there. I think he needs coaching. I think he needs a lot of defensive work done. But I think as an attacking fullback, I think he could turn out to be all right. But this system, although it's made Newcastle a little bit more open, a little bit more likely to score goals, it's also left them even more wide open defensively. I think, I don't want to spoil people's questions, but is this opening gambit? What I would do, and I wrote a piece on it today, if anybody wants to check it out on my Twitter, went out at lunchtime today, and it was just saying, I think Steve Bruce is weak. I think he's stood with Caldolo too long. I think Martin Dubravka's got to come in. I think it's quite an easy change to make, much easier now than it was at first. I don't think he was brave enough to do it. I think he had misplaced loyalty in some ways. I do believe, look, this isn't a criticism of Caldolo in any way, shape or form. He's Newcastle United number 2, and he's a bloody good number 2, to be honest. And he's performed. I think he's shown, sort of around the age of just turned 30 years, he's a much better number 1. He could probably do a job somewhere as a consistent number 1. He's come in and had a really good 6 months between the sticks. The clangers that he dropped in that championship season, there were a few, seem to have kind of gone from his game. Yes, he wasn't great for probably 2 of the goals at the weekend. And I think there's probably been a few games like that where you'd look at it and say, I can't remember which game it was. There was one where he sort of half went up for it was Aston Villa. It was the Aston Villa opener, Watkins, where he sort of doesn't even go with his arms. He sort of half sort of jumps into the attacker. There's been some errors, but I would say that consistently he's probably been much better than I expected. I think most people, if they ask that question of themselves, were you worried going into this season by the goalkeeping situation? Were you worried that Caldolo was going to basically drop win it? No Martin Dubravka long term, and I think a lot of people would have thought that. And I think on the balance of play, that hasn't been the case, and Caldolo's done well. But I think the time came not that long ago, maybe it's a month ago, 3 weeks ago, that he should have made the change. Everybody at that football club, the coaches, the footballers, the manager, they'll see him every single day. They'll see both goalkeepers, and they'll know exactly who the better goalkeeper is. They'll know it. And I think we're in a relegation battle now. Steve Bruce has to be brave. He has to grow the balls to make a big decision. He hasn't wanted to make that decision for quite some time, and I think now he should. You've got to put your best players out on the park. Newcastle United, you wouldn't see Fulham all of a sudden changing Areola. You wouldn't see Burnley suddenly dropping Nick Pope for a number 2. Or if they got injured and he had a couple of good games, you would see Nick Pope back in straight away. Because that's the situation that everybody's in. People need their best players out on the park, and Newcastle United have not had one of their real blue chip players. Like one of the players, for example, if we did get relegated, one of the real players who people will be clambering to sign and will get good money for, or somebody that if we steal, you really want to build a football team around. Martin Dubravka has to be in that team. And finally, I think another easy change to make is whether it's at centre-half, whether it's at full-back. I think Paul Dummett, if fit, can defend, and he is a proper defender. And for me, he has to be back in the team. I don't know what I would do right back. I don't think Emil Kraft's good enough. I think there's problems in midfield. I think John Joe Shelvey, even when Newcastle have played well, has been an absolute passenger. He was it was embarrassing watching him, I thought, at the weekend. He really was. The game just passed him by in every way, shape or form. And I think if there's a few players that probably I wouldn't want to see back in a black and white shirt, John Joe Shelvey would be one of them. And I think most people know my thoughts on that. I've been quite clear all the way through this. He's a player that Rafa Benitez was more than happy to get rid of in the first full summer that he had after relegation. Just so happened he didn't leave, and he ended up having a good season. He tried to get rid of him again after that. Steve Bruce has try to build a team around John Joe Shelvey, and I think that shows you like the levels of judgment between different levels of managers. Not for me. Joe Linton's another one that he's almost a waste of a shirt, and Emil Kraft's just not good enough. Look, he's a manager; he gets paid to make these decisions, but there needs to be some tweaks and changes. What I would say is it is an all disaster, and it might feel like it. Of course, it does. I mentioned last week about the schizophrenic nature of Newcastle United Twitter, and I get that to a certain extent. But what I would say is, if Newcastle play like they did for 50 minutes against lesser teams who won't hurt you as much as Manchester United can, then I think they'll be all right. But they do almost need to just cut out the defensive errors, because it's too often that players, whether it's wingers, wide forwards, always seem to find themselves in 10-yard acres of space inside the Newcastle from the penalty spot to the goal. It's quite incredible. You don't see any other team conceding those type of goals, and Newcastle United do consistently. And I've actually, over the weekend, heard a couple of pundits talk about, Steve Bruce, he's a centre-half, he should know one. Well, if he's a centre-half, he hasn't done a very good job of organising a back four. He hasn't done a very good job of organising a defensive unit. How, as a centre-half, you would think, well, I know what I want from the people in front of me. I need you to cover us here. I need you to be there when the ball's there. I need you to sort of drop in or get away from us, give us some space. There's none of that. It's just like a rabble, really. There's not really any organisation in that defensive unit. And I would say that there's been a lot more organisation since Graham Jones come in. I think everyone can see that. I think you see the variation on the free kicks, on the set pieces, which is a big part of what he does. We've seen the press. But I think one thing that Jones needs to get a grip on, if Bruce is incapable of doing it, is that defensive unit. And I'm not just talking about the four, I'm talking about how the midfield sort of helps those fullbacks out in this system, and how the centre-halves are protected as well. But first and foremost, they need to defend better and give themselves a chance in games, because I think if they just defended properly, they probably wouldn't have conceded 2 of those goals at Manchester United. And that's, you don't know how the game would have went, but I would say the first and second goals wouldn't have been conceded if Newcastle United just defended average. They didn't even have to defend well. If they'd just been average, they wouldn't have conceded those 2 goals. But that's why they are where they are. The 17th in the table, because they're one of the worst defences in the division. And that was there for everybody to see against probably one of the better sides in the division.
Yeah, I agree. Great to have as many watching, over 550 watching tonight, which is fantastic. Good to have you here. If you're a first-time visitor to the channel, then please subscribe. You just need to click that little box down in the bottom right-hand corner. Click subscribe, hit the like button, and also hit the share button, and that will help us build the NUFC Matters community. Big shout-out to our sponsors for this month, Spider VPN, who of course are on board with us this month, and they've agreed to come on next month as well. They're that happy, so a big shout out to them. Thank you very much for helping us out. Big shout out as well to John from qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend and Newcastle, and a big shout out to Jab Signature as well, who make all of our flyers. If you missed the show, you can catch us on Spotify and iTunes and wherever else you get your podcasts from. And don't forget, we are straight on after this show tonight with Kevin Gallagher, a live Q&A with Kevin Gallagher. So if you just find that on the playlists and come straight back, you will be able to ask your questions to a former Newcastle United player. We will be joined in 15 minutes by Harry de Cosmo, who has written this book, Black and White Night. We did invite him on last week, and he couldn't make it, so Liam and I are going to have him on as a guest for 10 minutes tonight, just to promote his book, which I think a lot of you will have probably bought. Let's try and get through a few questions though, Liam. David Reed says, Liam, stick or twist with the current manager?
Twist.
Twist, okay. Simple answer to a simple question. I will go back to Peter Robson's. He said he asked you a question last week about what it meant to be a fan. This week he wants to know, if you could go back in time and watch any game live in person, which game would you choose and why? That's a great question.
Peter, you get deep every week. You need to start sending these questions in advance. So any game,
I'll tell you which one I would go to. I would go to see Newcastle United play Manchester City at Wembley. Jackie Milburn scores the fastest goal in the FA Cup final. Newcastle win 3-1. That's the game I would go back to.
I've got to say, when it first came into my mind, it would have to be Newcastle United winning something. So whether it would be the Fairs Cup in '69 or whether it would be a domestic trophy in the 50s, it would almost certainly be something like that. There's certain games in my lifetime that I wasn't able to get tickets for, wasn't really old enough, didn't have a season ticket and things like that I really wish I was there. Now, they aren't necessarily success stories as in trophies, obviously, knowing my age. But I would love to have been at the Barcelona game. I wasn't there. I would love to have been there that night. My dad was there, of course, in the Gallagher. But I would love to have been there. But I was only 8 or 9 years old. You know what I mean? So I never got it. You couldn't buy it in the 36,000. You couldn't get a ticket for love nor money those days. I got a press pass off Kenny Dalglish for that, and I was in the. My dad and my brother were in our normal seats, and I was in the press box. Me and Kenny had a great relationship, and fantastic. That I was on the touchline. I did an interview with Simon O'Rourke on
on the side of the pitch as Barcelona were warming up, and I was standing next to Louis van Gaal waiting to go live with their Northeast Tonight on Tyne Tees with Simon. That was special.
Brilliant.
It's even better just to be there, but to actually to be on the touchline and see the players warming up, etc. Fantastic, man. Great stuff. Great stuff. Other questions. 100% Mag says, question for Liam: what does he make of the picture of Ashley in Dubai at the GMG? Obviously, there was a picture of Mike Ashley circulating on social media over the weekend, looking a bit slimmer and looking as if he dyed his hair, although I'm sure it was just the lighting in the room. But was it significant that he was across in the Middle East?
Awful shoes. As many
awful shoes, yeah.
No, it wasn't takeover related. It's largely it's more of a reflection on his business ideas at the moment, that he wants to expand in that market, and the people who he was meeting are particular major players, sports shops, sports retailers, warehouses, etc. in that region, and that's just an extension of the business opportunities that he sees in that area. Now, of course, that in some ways that general idea does tie in a little bit to the idea of the Saudis coming on board at Newcastle United, because there is a massive market for in Saudi Arabia. It's a very young country, very progressive, now very active. You're seeing women involved in sport. You're seeing a lot of young men really involved in sport in that area. And actually, in a weird kind of way, of all the Middle Eastern countries, a real rich football and heritage in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, not with regards to comparing to European clubs, European countries, etc. But they have got a real a passion for football, and I think he wants to tap into that young population who have got cash, who want to go out and train, etc. And that's what that's his retail market. So no, I don't believe takeover related.
Okay, Chris Collins says, anybody wants to escape Newcastle for a few minutes, try standing on a 3-pin plug. It's temporary and helps, but only just. Matt Kelly prefers Lego, he says. So Chris is going to try that tomorrow. I'm sure this is just kids leaving things lying all over the house, and obviously, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with them posts, lads. Ashley Perry says, there's been nothing for a few weeks on the takeover. A lot of optimism seems to have diminished. What is that down to? Are we approaching crunch time imminently? Good question, Ashley. I put it down to takeover fatigue last week, didn't I, Liam? I wasn't my usual bubbly self on the whole takeover last week. I posted the photograph of mouldy bread because that's exactly how it felt. But silence. And, we've said on this programme before, silence is, it can be golden. Do we feel as if there's any movement, or is it, is it just... is there just nothing happening? I mean, what would you suggest? I know you don't know 100%, but what would you suggest?
Look, I think it's really easy to fill a void with negativity. And I think that's essentially what a lot of people have done. I'm not going to say to anybody that there is any negativity or positivity. I just think the process is underway. And I think ultimately we'll have to trust the people involved in the process, and just trying to be careful what I say. It's effectively there will be something come of this process. Effectively, there was always the fear last year that nothing would come of it. Something will come of this process, arbitration, legal cases, etc. But I would argue that anybody putting definitive time scales on things are largely guessing, or have been fed sort of duff information from somebody, because that's not something that I'm going to do. It's not something I know Steve's done, because everybody felt like there were a lot of time scales in 2020, and I think a lot of people, it really paid a lot of people off, saying, "Oh, it'll be done by X, it'll be done by Y and Z," and it never was. And I think it's really dangerous to do that. I get the clamour, I get the idea that a lot of people want answers. But unfortunately, at the moment, the process is happening. Things are moving, but it's all confidential, and this is the way it should be, and it's the way it should have probably been since last January. And I think if it had been since last January, we'd probably have been in a better place. But there can't be any criticism level anybody for that. It's just the nature of the game and the nature of the excitement around the deal, and things do leak out and things come out left, right, and centre. But at the moment, nothing's leaking out, and I don't necessarily think that's a negative thing. I'm not gonna jump the other way and say it's definitely a positive thing either. But all I would say is that we genuinely just have to be patient. And that's really difficult. It's really difficult because the football's rubbish, and like we're sort of staring relegation in the face. And you do want that escapism, not a three-pin plug or the Lego. You want the escapism of a potential future on the horizon, like a real something to really get your teeth into, and a bright future to look forward to. But unfortunately, the legal stuff, as expected, is taking a little bit of time, and it will take time. And I think everyone's just going to try and be patient. The most important thing at the moment, I know people don't want to hear it, is just staying in the division. Newcastle United have got to stay in this division. That's the most important thing for me.
Yeah, Tom Lynch says, is it fair that there could be home fans at Craven Cottage for the last game of the season, potentially a relegation decider? Is anyone officially highlighting this? My latest information on this is that the Premier League haven't decided whether fans will be allowed back in for that final game of the season. It's still under discussion. But yeah, theoretically, if it does happen, is it fair, Liam?
I think the clubs will probably get a say in this. I think they'll be asked. I think there may well be a vote. I think if Fulham had fans in and Newcastle didn't, then of course it would be unfair. Now, like I've seen a lot of people say things like, "Well, we shouldn't be having to rely on that." Well, it doesn't matter if we are relying on that on the final day, getting a result at Fulham, and they have fans in and we don't. It is an unfair situation. Top and bottom of it, it would always be unfair anyway in some ways because you would have a bigger crowd compared to a smaller crowd. But for Newcastle to not have any crowd, it would be really, really unfair. I think if there'd be they wouldn't want people travelling, etc. So there wouldn't be a split. It would effectively just be home fans, and to me, that wouldn't be a fair situation. Look, I've heard rumours about the Sheffield United game getting switched, so it actually goes over the deadline for the changes in the lockdown roadmap. So the Sheffield United game could essentially have a crowd. There could be 10,000 people at the Newcastle United against Sheffield United, which is the second last game of the season. And I think were that to be the case, then I think you could probably argue that you wouldn't have too many complaints as long as Newcastle had a home game with a home crowd. Then you'd probably accept that as well. I think that would be more of a fair trade-off. But as you said, Steve, there are plenty of rumours going around that the Premier League may well just decide that no, there'll be no crowds for the season and we'll just come back next season.
Tom Dixon says, would you give Andy Carroll a chance this weekend? It seems he's not getting many games for us.
Probably not, no. No, probably wouldn't. I would, although I've liked the system, I would definitely look to get Dwight Gale in the team, and I would look to get him central. I think you've got a striker there who can score goals when he plays central, and I think you've got a formation and a system where we've got players who can play around that. Go back more to the idea of maybe like a 4-2-3-1 type thing with your Almirons and St Maximins, etc., buzzing in and around, and Gale as your central striker. That's the kind of the team that I would probably look to play.
Okay, B. Taylor says, what about Wilson? Can we expect him back early? Of course, there was a video circulating again over the weekend of Wilson, training again, light training, so that's a positive.
I'd be very surprised if they rush him back. I'm not going to say, with these things, it's essentially quite a difficult process. So you'll have the player largely decides whether he's fit or not. Obviously, they'll keep scanning him and keeping an eye on the injury itself and how he reacts. But it's a slow process with these kind of tear injuries, whereby you've got to take small steps and just keep pushing that bit further, rest, push a bit further. So of course he's active. He's not sitting there on his settee, sort of strapped up and things like that. It's not one of those injuries, but it's one that if you do rush back and there is still a slight issue with it, and somebody who relies upon pace and explosive pace at times, like a Callum Wilson, then it's likely to go again. So it's one of those that you can't rush back. I'd be very surprised if we see him back before April. Very, very surprised.
Okay, Ben Jacobs' interview, of course, we followed on from Gallagher's Shots. We got him on the show at the weekend. I enjoyed interviewing him, found him quite a pleasant guy. Wilfred enjoyed the interview as well. He said he found it revealing and enjoyable. He just wants to know what your opinion was on Ben, or is.
Yeah, Ben talks a good game. Yeah, he's really sort of informative. Answered all the questions. Got some tough questions. Came out of them quite well. And he's really, he's got a lot of contacts in that area and certain parts of the Middle East. So yeah, it was an entertaining podcast. Another string to Steve's bow. seems to get. He's got everybody from every side on in the last few weeks, and we've had Alan Shearer's, we've had all sorts. So yeah, it was another enjoyable one. Lots of good ex-players, and I didn't mention, you keep talking about Kevin Gallagher. I worked up in Dundee for 5 years, and he's a Dundee United legend up there because he was sort of playing in the teams that in the 80s and stuff that did really well in European competitions and things like that. So yeah, I look forward to that one. I'll be jumping straight off here and watching you guys chatting later on.
John Richards asking whether you've seen that story that was run about Pardew and how he got the 8-year deal. I haven't read it yet. Have you? Andy Woodman.
No, I haven't seen it.
We'll have to check up on that then. I saw the story, but apparently it was on a podcast that mentioned about how they got the 8-year deal. I haven't watched it yet. Dubravka Darlow's getting a lot of mention in the comments. Is the indication to you that Dubravka's probably going to get the nod at the weekend?
I've not had any indication at all. I wrote that piece today at lunchtime, just because I'm at the end of my tether with it. I would have probably done it. Look, I would have been tempted to do it as soon as he came back fit. I maybe would have given Darlow a couple of games. I probably would have definitely changed it after Aston Villa. But what do I know? I would have probably sacked Steve Bruce after Aston Villa. I thought that was abject. So I think that was probably a time when change was due. And as was always the case with Newcastle United, we always have to go well over the hill before any change ever happens.
Tim Cairns is asking, what was your thoughts on the decisions with JBH by Maguire and Rashford's dive and the lack of players disputing the decisions? A lot of talk about that, of course. There was a little bit of controversy throughout the game, but a lack of passion. It's what the players have been accused of.
I don't know what happened in the aftermath of that, because I would expect if you're Jamal Lascelles and you've been wiped out the way he was by Maguire, it almost seemed intentional. Did he not sprint up to the referee and was screaming at him, telling him to go and have a look or make sure that they do check it? I don't know what happened there, but it was obviously pointed out to everybody at half time. Quite an incredible one, almost an assault really, and it should have been a penalty and quite possibly a red card as well. And you never know. That's what I'm saying. These small decisions could have a big impact. And the weird thing about it is I've seen no analysis of it either. There was no mention on Match of the Day. There was no mention in the aftermath of the game. It was almost just forgotten about. But, this is what happens. I'm pretty sure if it was Jamal Lascelles on Harry Maguire in the Newcastle box, I'm sure we would have seen plenty of column inches devoted to that and plenty of analysis in the post-match interviews.
Yeah, Sutty says it is clear that Ashley's going to stick with Bruce to keep us up, but why? Ashley potentially could lose out on millions, which is not like him. Bruce should have been shown the door after the Sheffield United defeat. I mean, a lot of people talking about that. A lot of people asking whether you think Ashley, whether the Premier League stand a chance against Ashley and Nick DeMarco. Stephen Grossman saying stay in the Premier but remain with Ashley, or relegation and new owners. I know what I'd rather have. So lots of people, talking about this tonight.
But what I would say was that Sutty question is, it's not like him. It's very like him. This idea that Mike Ashley doesn't gamble is ridiculous. He gambles all the time, and he always waits till it's too late. He doesn't make, or the people that he trusts to make football decisions don't make very good ones. And this is another bad footballing decision. Steve Bruce wouldn't have got in the door at most other Premier League clubs, but the top and bottom of it is he is here. But he would have been gone a long time ago at most other clubs as well. I think he would have been booted during that absolutely horrendous run. So I think it's very like Ashley. I think it's very like Ashley to trust Bruce. It's almost, in some ways, the way I would look at it is it's almost like when you sell a house, maybe, that you don't want to. I remember I sold my house a few years ago and the boiler needed done. I just didn't want to do it. I was desperate to get rid of the house before I had to do something with the boiler because it was ancient. And so I just left it. It's almost like Steve Bruce is that boiler. That sounds quite weird, but he almost is. He's like
never heard Steve Bruce being described as a boiler before, but there's a first time for everything. It's 6:30. I did say we're going to have a guest on tonight, and it's a big welcome to Harry De Cosmo. How are you, mate?
Hi, Steve. Thank you very much for having me on.
Good to see you, mate. And we've got you on because of this, Black and White Night, the new book that's out. Everybody is talking about it on social media at the minute. A great book, and one which I would imagine gave you a hell of a lot of pleasure writing.
Yeah, it was amazing to get through from the start to the end. Really, it was brilliant. And the way it happened was it paralleled lockdown. basically. So I had the idea in March, just before lockdown, and then did all the interviews and the writing at the height of the pandemic. So it enabled me the opportunity to keep working when, as a freelancer, work was drying up, especially when the football wasn't on, and to speak to a lot of people that I admire and write about a topic and a man that I love. So it was a great experience from start to finish, really.
What was the inspiration behind it? I mean, obviously a bit of time off during lockdown is one thing, but I mean, was it an idea that you had a few years ago, or was it one that just came to you during this period of lockdown?
Well, I always wanted to write a book. That was the start of it, really. I guess I always wanted. The book was the idea, was the thing, and then the idea would come later, I guess, is what I would say. And then when it eventually hit me, it was because the inspiration is because I think there's a generation of people, of which I am one, that doesn't remember the Kevin Keegan era. Remember it as a fan. My dad's told me all the stories and all that sort of thing, and I've grown up on it. But I was born in 1994, so I don't actually remember the stories myself. My experience supporting Newcastle United started in 2001, when Sir Bobby was in charge. So I fell in love with Newcastle and St James's Park. All that experience that everyone talks about was thanks to Sir Bobby. So that's kind of the first part, and then the second part is I think culturally it's not understood beyond Newcastle how much of an impact Sir Bobby had at the club. I think when you think about his career and you look at the documentaries and that sort of thing, everything that he's done, that's been done on his career. It covers Ipswich, it covers England, it covers Barcelona, all of those stories. Rightly so, by the way. That's great. But Newcastle's always felt like, he went home for 5 years at the end of his career, and that was sort of it. And actually, I think that the job he gets underrated by people outside of Newcastle. So it's a tribute from my perspective, and for Newcastle fans, I hope they enjoy reading it as a tribute. But for people who don't follow Newcastle every day, I think I hope it would maybe educate people on, why he did such a great job and what he meant to the city and to the club at a crucial moment, because obviously Newcastle going through a difficult spell at the moment, but they were on the precipice of something really disastrous at the end of Ruud Gullit's reign, and Bobby came in and saved them, and that's basically the story. Picks up from there and drops off when Bobby leaves, and it sort of tries to explain, if any future owners. Actually, there's a good point. Actually, is when I started writing it, it was at the time when everyone thought that the takeover was guaranteed. So it was almost, there was going to be a sort of element of, this is what the blueprint is for whoever the owners are to come in to succeed. It's sort of the same thing, but just not as definite, not as absolute now. It's just a sort of use what Bobby did as a guideline, and you'll go quite far, because he united the city. That's why it's called why House of Bobby Robson made Newcastle United again, is because he united the city, he united the community, and with the club, and that's something that the club just isn't anymore, and that's that's such a shame.
Yeah, I mean, the book is it's a story of the rebirth and redemption of Newcastle United, which is clearly something which needs to happen now. It's available from March the 15th. You can get it on Amazon. I will stick the link down below. Pitch Publishing have brought it out, nearly 300 pages. Who have you spoken to, Harry, for your research for this book?
So, I mean, I pretty much get everybody I was aiming to get in terms of the necessity, I guess, in terms of I wanted every angle covered. I wanted his family, so I spoke to Mark Robson. The foundation are involved, and that's a point when I'm going to make a voluntary donation to the foundation with my own part of my own percentage of my own sales. In terms of the football side, John Carver was key. Charlie Woods, who's the chief scout, Paul Montgomery, who's another scout, they were key as well from the background, the backroom staff and that sort of thing. Playing staff, Warren Barton, Rob Lee, who I know you obviously know very well, Steve. And Nobby Solano was in there as well, Robbie Elliott. So, most of the people that I was aiming to get who would, and everyone was, Shay Gibbons, another one as well, who's a childhood hero of mine. These people were willing to speak to me because I went and said I was going to write a book about Sir Bobby, and it was an opportunity to celebrate him and pay tribute to him. And I think the people were just so pleased to get involved, and I think that's a mark of the man, really, rather than anything that I did. I think it's purely on the name of Sir Bobby, really.
Have you got any favourite parts to the book, Harry? Is there any bit that you look on now and go, that's my favourite story? Or
various different ways. I mean, there's a whole chapter that's dedicated to Sir Bobby as a person, his sort of background a little bit, I guess. There's a chapter dedicated to his foundation, which I found very emotional to write, and pleasant and unpleasant in certain ways, because it also sadly covers his death. From a journalistic point of view, I'm quite pleased with the chapter that runs up to the summer before he gets sacked, because I really found out a lot of background information to the sort of meat on the bones type stuff that everyone. I don't think some people will not learn very much when they read the book, but they might learn why things happened rather than what happened, if that makes sense. And that's kind of my favorite. My favorite from an emotional standpoint. The last chapter is beautiful to listen. Was beautiful to research and listen to. The third to last chapter is actually probably journalistically my favorite. But there's plenty of stories, talking about the matches, the Feyenoord game, and Manchester United 4-3. All the same games that everyone loves to talk about. I love to talk about that to those games to the people I was speaking to, and it was. I guess the one thing, if I was going to sell the book, I would say is it's I'm a fan myself, and I've written it as if I would want to read it. That's how I've tried to approach it.
Fantastic. Well, it's out 15th of March, and people can pre-order the book now on Amazon. Definitely well worth a read, that, and good luck with it, Harry. It's always good to read new stuff, and Bobby Robson is a legend up here. So well done on that. Good luck with the book, and we'll hopefully get you back on one day to talk about Newcastle as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheers. Anytime. Cheers.
Take care, Harry. Bye bye, mate. Great to have Harry on, and good luck to him with the book. We will give that a plug, and I'm sure most of you will probably go out and buy that. Definitely want to stick on your list for Christmas and birthdays and the like as well. So well worth a read. Gary Hasty, he says, when is Fede back? I know it won't happen, but Lascelles needs dropped yet to turn up this season. A lot of criticism for Lascelles at the minute, Liam.
I think Fernandez will be back at the weekend, so there's going to be a decision to make in that sense. Yeah, does he go back to the three? Does he match up with the Wolves who quite often, I've not seen Wolves recently, so maybe they've tweaked, but they quite often play three at the back with the wing backs, quite attacking wing backs. So he could match it up by just bringing him in alongside as well and switching that formation around a bit. But if he sticks with it, the best two central defenders that Newcastle have for me are at the moment, fit ones are Kieran Clark and Fede Fernandez. Jamal Lascelles is a reasonable leader, a reasonable captain, but he's probably not in the top three centre halves at the football club, to be honest. And that's not really I'm not trying to be critical of the captain there, but I think in terms of ability that Fabian Shaw, Fede Fernandez and Kieran Clark are all better footballers.
Yeah, Alan Thompson says, is there a long-term plan, do you think, by Ashley and Bruce, that as well as lack of investment has got the fan base angry, negative, depressed? Does anyone believe we are not going down? I mean, it's going to be tight, isn't it? I think there's no doubt about that. But do you think there's a long-term plan by Ashley, or do you think his main aim is just to sell the club?
I don't think there's any... I don't quite know what you mean, Alan. Is there a long-term plan? Has there been planning made for the summer? Yes, there has. Do I believe that Steve Bruce, if Mike Ashley still owns the football club in the summer, do I believe that Steve Bruce will still be the manager? Yes, I do. He wants to stick with him. It's a decision that he doesn't want to make. I don't believe any of this is premeditated. I don't think these struggles are premeditated. I just don't think Steve Bruce is very good at his job, and Mike Ashley isn't very good at delegating football and decisions to the right people. That's why we kind of sit where we are at the moment. And do I think we'll get relegated? I've said that throughout this, and I don't have a massive amount of confidence in my opinion. But I do believe Newcastle have got enough to stay in this division, and I think they will. I think they will stay in the division. But it's going, like you said, Steve, it's going to be tight.
This is an interesting one that's come up. The stats that, essentially Steve Bruce has actually got a better points total than Rafa Benitez did at this stage. I saw the comparison. However, Rafa always has a great end of the season. I remember that was the one thing that, I was told by his manager, his agent and his accountant when he first came to the club. Don't panic at the start of the season if the results aren't going according to plan, because Rafa always turns it round and always has a good run in. Does Steve Bruce have the same? That's the big question. But yeah, it's an interesting perspective. And I did have this graph up, this up the other day. I'll just knock that banner off for a second. And that's the Premier League since Christmas Day, Liam, and it makes bleak reading, doesn't it? That's, forget about comparisons from yesteryear. That is the one thing that you should be looking at and thinking, I am a bit worried about this. Goals per match, Newcastle bottom. Goals against per match, Newcastle bottom. Points per match, Newcastle bottom. And our rivals, of course, all above us. You know what I mean? Some of them, obviously comfortably as well. West Brom, Sheffield United. It's a big worry. Brighton are up in 8th in that table. So,
wait there. Can I ask a question, Steve?
Yeah.
So 17th, Sheffield United, goals per match 0.6, goals against per match 1.5. It's not really. It's marginal difference.
It's marginal, but Newcastle's still in there. I mean, Liverpool are 16th, of course. I can't wait to play them. Of course, they'll be on a great run by the time we play them. But yeah, I mean, it just shows you though. It just shows you that the ludicrous statements. It comes back to what you said at the top of the show about Steve Bruce, being, not really thinking about what he's saying. He doesn't put his brain in gear before he opens his mouth. The stats tell you we're in trouble, and we're
this though. We've known it for a long time, haven't we? Anybody who's watching Newcastle United since Steve Bruce took over, the way I sort of divided up is almost till the Christmas period of his first season, Newcastle United were almost sort of riding the crest of a wave and got enough points and enough results to be fine. Because they were still largely organised, the dressing room was still the same. It was still the same players that had been playing under Benitez. Largely the same formation as well. It was a good, solid dressing room. Then they struggled, really struggled. They had that. I mean, if you remember back at this time last year, you couldn't buy a goal at home. They were terrible 0-0 draws and rubbish in the FA Cup. Even though they ended up getting reasonably far, it was dreadful in those early rounds. And then you have the lockdown after the break. And it was like an anomaly when Newcastle United had 4 or 5 games at the start of that lockdown where they just did enough to stay up. And I would argue since that point, since they sort of went off the boil around that Bournemouth game, which was like the sort of almost the best performance of Steve Bruce's time potentially. Then after that, they've never been anywhere near. They've been a really, really poor side for the best part of since that lockdown, since midway through that lockdown period. They were rubbish at the end of the lockdown period, and they've barely kicked the ball this season. I mean, you would say the West Ham game they were okay and they won. I quite like the Everton home game. I did think they played quite well in that game and nearly threw it away at the end. Southampton was a really good performance, really good, given the circumstances. But that table shows Southampton have been absolute rubbish since Christmas. So you can hardly hold that up as being like amazing opposition that they've beaten. But apart from that, there's been very, very few performances where you could sort of hang your hat on and say, look, they've been really good. Yeah. Newcastle is 17th in the division. They're only 17th in the division because the teams below them are worse than them or have been to this point. They're only there because the teams that got promoted didn't strengthen and have very few Premier League players in the squad. Talking about sort of Fulham are in that. West Brom are definitely in that. And then you've got a Sheffield United squad who really ridiculously overperformed up till that lockdown last year. And again, just like Newcastle United, have been rubbish since then. Like Sheffield United never kicked the ball in the lockdown period in the summer, and they've never really started this season. They've been awful. But of course, as we remember, they've still got Newcastle United to play towards the end of the season, so they'll probably get another result. But yeah, it's been a really challenging time to be a Newcastle United fan. Really challenging, and when you compare that to the Benitez time, where it felt like we had an identity again, it felt like we were getting a little bit of our football club back. It's just even more sobering to then step back into the absolute dross that Mike Ashley's tenure sort of serves up, which is where we are now. And I'd be interested to know what fans out there think. Where does Steve Bruce, in terms of how bad Newcastle United have been, how rubbish the football's been, that horrendous runs of winless games, the lack of opportunities, not even lack of goals, the lack of opportunities Newcastle create. I would be interested to know where people rate Steve Bruce now, because I remember we did a show, Steve, didn't we, where we did, I think it was around maybe Christmas time, where we did the managers of Mike Ashley and where they kind of ranked, and it'd be interesting to see where Steve Bruce ranked in that now, because I would argue he's right up there with the very worst.
Yeah, I would agree. John's question there, Liam, is the lack of fitness a symptom of all these days off? I mean, I think one of the things nobody could believe was that after a defeat, albeit at Old Trafford, where you're not expecting to go and win really, even with a full strength team in Newcastle's current state, but then he gives the players a day off.
I can see why fans criticise that. I suppose some wouldn't, some would. It's I don't know. I'm always loath to criticise managers for that kind of thing, as long as he's not giving them 3 days off in the week. You know what I mean? As long as he's keeping them working and keeping their fitness up and working on things, and it's not necessarily fitness. It shouldn't be fitness at this stage of the season, to be honest. Fitness is what you put there in the summer.
We only look like we can play an hour, Liam.
I do actually agree with you there. I do. I think there is a fitness problem. But fitness isn't something at this stage of the season. You can't catch that up. That's the type of thing that you put in the summer, and you've got to keep ticking over throughout the season. You cannot get a squad fit now. You cannot suddenly run them into the ground because you're right off 3 to 4 weeks of your season. You just can't do it. So Newcastle United are what they are. All you should really be working on as a manager is set pieces, is players, is tactics and positioning, as opposed to the opposition of what you think they'll line up, etc. Your formation, if you're changing it, you should never really be working on fitness. But I do agree that Newcastle don't look the fittest of sides.
How many points do you think it's going to take to stay up? Asks B. Taylor.
Yeah, I think it's crept up. I did say this, if you go back 2 weeks, anybody who watches the show regularly, I did think that Fulham, if they were going to put a fight up and stay up in this division, then they had to get points, and they've done that. And I think because they've sort of stood up and been counted in the last few weeks, I would argue that your 31, 32 mark may well have gone up to around 35, 36 to stay up. I'll look at the next 7 games in Newcastle United's fixture list and say, if we want to be going to that little horror run that we have before those final 2 games of the season, where we play all the top sides, that we probably need to win. I would argue we need to win 3 of those games to make sure we're in there, and that would put the 34 points. Three wins out of those 7.
Tom wants to know how Joe Linton is. I mean, it looked like a back injury. Any news on that?
We'll find out that one, Tom, later in the week. I don't know what to say about that one. You're desperate for him to be back in the side. I don't think many Newcastle United fans are. I think Joe Linton's really struggled. The thing that really annoys me with Joe Linton is how one-paced he is. He's so slow in everything that he does. His reactions, his movement, the ball at feet, just everything about him is just so one-paced. And I would argue I've not really seen many Premier League footballers like it. It's quite incredible that somebody thought we'll pay that kind of money for that footballer, but it's all ground. We know we've got a dud, and effectively they just have to try and get something out of him between now and the end of the season. Look, tell you what the lad could do is get himself fit. He's always injured. He's always going down injured. Get himself fit and just go and score a couple of bloody goals, man. Keep this team in the division. Help your fellow strikers out. But there's never been any signs of that. He never gets close enough to the box to sort of scare any defenders anyway.
Kevin says you need a background picture. How about that one of the fish, the shark that they found today? Did you see that one with a human face?
No, I do. On what? What on earth?
That's a classic, isn't it? Absolute classic.
The Casper the shark, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like Baby Shark, but it's a baby shark with a human face. Absolutely brilliant. So maybe use that as your background. Google it, find it. You can have that. You can have that on me. I'm going to really laugh now to see what you come up with next week. In fact, that's the kind of thing Daz would come up with on the Worldwide Squad and Match Day Live. It really is the kind of thing he would come up with. Wayne Bennett says, if there's no takeover, what will our prospective budget be? Or will it be bargain basement signings and free loans? I mean, I suppose it depends which division we're in, doesn't it? And it depends who owns the club. Because if the takeover goes through, it'll be a different story, you know. But we need to stay up, first of all.
Yeah, I think no takeover. I think it's going to be bargain basement at Newcastle United. Be massive financial impact to the football club this year. But I suspect you'll probably see that largely in the whole of the Premier League. If Newcastle United are still there, I think a lot of clubs, you'll see a lot of loan deals with options. I think a lot of football clubs will take advantage of that. I think there'll be a lot of movement, but I think there'll be a lot of loan deals. A lot of players running their contracts down and allowing themselves to go for free, because effectively that's probably the only opportunity they're going to have to make a good payday for themselves. So yeah, I think it's going to be that. Look, that's not going to excite anybody, but it's a reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. Newcastle United has always been a football club under Mike Ashley that has to run itself. He doesn't want to put any money in. Of course, he will if they get relegated. But yeah, it's going to be grim. I suspect it'll be a grim summer, and they're going to be hoovering up the likes of the Frasers and stuff that they got last year, who's really, really disappointed me in terms of his attitude and application. Really
takes into Bede's question nicely. Then he says, "Do you think Brian Fraser owes us a huge performance?"
I think he owes us everything. I think he's been dreadful. Being brutally honest, I think when he comes on, he doesn't look like a player who fancies it. I think there's something not right about him. I think, look, my boss at work, Ross Gregory, people might know him from Twitter, but he talked a lot about it. And he said he's not the type of player you would want in the trenches. When you look at what he did at Bournemouth, you look at the way other things that have gone on. I speak to his old agent. He dumped his old agent last summer because he had somebody whispering in his ear. I thought he was going to get a move to Tottenham and Arsenal. I think Newcastle United is a poor second place. I think he really thought he was going to get that big move. And I think he just looks like a player who isn't massive on being here, being brutally honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Rob Sims, I apologise, mate. He says, never mentioned Baby Shark. Ben was quiet until you did. Now she wants Baby Shark on. I'm sorry. I'd never give it any thought. I was thinking about Liam's background. That's all I was thinking of. Kenneth Wilson, thanks for becoming a member. If anybody else wants to do that, it's much appreciated. You just click become a member. You can make a small donation to the channel. As I say, we do all of this for free. So if you want to make a small donation, it's great. We do plough it back in. We've got a great StreamYard application. We've got HD now, so those people who've got decent internet, which rules me and Malcolm out, will start to look a bit brighter and look a bit smarter, I think, with the HD. We're now able to broadcast on a couple of different areas as well, which we're doing. A Match Day Live, we can now get up to 12 people on. So a big thank you to our sponsors who've allowed us to do that, which is great. As I say, we just plough it back in, which is great. But if you become a YouTube member, you can help us do that. Tom again coming in with some great questions. What's happening with Matt Ritchie? He is the most experienced player in that squad, or one of the most, probably alongside Shelby, etc. For me, he's my favourite player at the club at the moment. Can't get a look in.
This is where we sort of differ, isn't it? Matt Ritchie's not one of my favourite players. He used to be, and I think not for me now. He's not a player that really, I don't think he fits in the system that they're playing in particular. And I think there was issues. I think he was a player who really he did want to go. I think he set his heart on leaving, and I think Steve Bruce hinted at that. So yeah, I think there's issues there. I think he's a player who definitely leave in the summer. So we'll just have to wait and see. But look, if it continues this way, you've got to look at players like that and say, should he come in? That's a cheek, isn't it, Mark? Fancy coming on here and saying that.
This is a reference to your hair. Now, I did say it beforehand, and we went down the route of hair last night. But everybody on the 5-minute rant seemed to want to say about bald heads and this, that, and the other. Where I came on and saw you the night, I went, Christ Almighty, you've got like, where's that hair come from? It's like proper lockdown hair, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's one of them things. I was absolutely desperate with this lockdown roadmap. I was thinking, March, get in right, March. The barbers will be open. Nah, April. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger. My missus can cut hair, but I just don't fancy her doing it. I'm just gonna hold out for the barbers this time.
Okay, we'll take this as the last question because I've got to jump on with Kevin Gallagher shortly. Who are you starting up front against Wolves at the weekend?
So I'm probably tweaking the system, like I said, to go to a 4-2-3-1, and I'm going to put Dwight Gale as my central striker. Dwight Gale's probably the only player in this squad who can definitely score goals, and we just need to get something out of him. Rekindle that little bit of lockdown Dwight Gale that came in and looked like a sharp player with a point to prove. I think he's lost that. I think he's a player who's definitely going to leave in the summer. And I think it's just, can Bruce motivate Dwight Gale to get in this side and really prove some people wrong? He was knocking on the door. He was complaining. He wanted games. Now he's got an opportunity to get games. He needs to take that, and Newcastle need him to start scoring some goals too.
Comrade DAC on Twitter is saying that he's asked a question a few times. I must have missed it, mate, because obviously we've been overloaded with questions. If you want to get it in quickly, I will be able to ask that question. Give us your prediction on the match at the weekend.
Probably, I'm going to go for a ones each, exactly like what we're seeing down at Molineux.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it's going to be a draw as well, to be honest, mate. I really do. I think, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a tough watch as well. I'm just glad that I'm not in St James's Park to watch it. You know what I mean? It's one of those. It's one of those games. Alex says, question for Liam. I watched the podcast with Ben Jacobs. He thinks the takeover will go through with relegation, as Amanda has her heart set on us and all the work being put in by the buyers. Do you share that idea?
So you have to split this really. I don't believe that the Saudis, I want to say the Saudi state, that's what we're trying to separate. It is all connected. I don't think the Saudis are going to want to walk through the door at Newcastle United as a second-tier club. I just don't believe it. Of course, it's an investment, but it's also something that they want to walk through with the flags waving high. They're trying to buy into the biggest product around the world, biggest footballing product, the Premier League. Don't think they want to buy into the Championship. Now, separate that. Do I think Amanda Staveley wants to buy Newcastle United even if they're relegated? Yeah, I think they've shown absolute face since about, was it, Steve, 2017, was it, when they first
2017, yeah.
We're talking the best part of 4 years now that they've been sort of really fighting to find investors, working on deals, sort of breaking ice with Mike Ashley. So yeah, I think it wouldn't surprise me if this all fails. That's a massive if, by the way. If it all fails, that Amanda Staveley, murdered PCP, etc., come back fighting again, and try to buy Newcastle United in some way, shape, or form with fresh investment.
Yep. Okay, great stuff, Liam. I'm going to cut us short because I'm jumping on now with Kevin Gallagher. Great to have you on as always, mate. Quick plug for the Shields Gazette.
Yeah, if anybody watches out there and don't know, I work for the Shields Gazette. We do our own podcast. We do one called Mouth of the Time. We're going to get Steve on this week. He's agreed to come on, so we'll roles reversed. I'll be the host asking Steve the questions this time. So tune in for that. We'll probably do that on Wednesday or Thursday. But yeah, just give me a follow. You can see it down there at Liam Kennedy, at Liam J Kennedy 23. Just give us a follow, and if you like what I do on here, subscribe, because we have our own subscription service at the Shields Gazette. We don't buy into all this clickbait rubbish. We just go for the quality stuff, but you have to pay for it. So yeah, that's me plug.
Jason Carter, thanks. He says, great show, the meat and potatoes of the channel. That's I like that.
At least he didn't say meat and two veg anyway.
It's good night from me anyway. It's good for 2 minutes. It's good night from Liam, and it's good night from Baby Shark. See you later, Liam. Take care.
See you later. Cheers.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.